I went to Afghanistan with the Air Force during the war in Afghanistan. I went for 24 hours and nothing went according to plan. And we ended up thinking we were going to get stuck there. And I never told my parents that I was going to Afghanistan. We landed at 10 o'clock at night in Bagram Air Base, and the door had opened on the side of the plane. We hadn't got off the plane yet. And about 10 minutes after we landed, the base came in a rocket attack, and 3 rockets hit 100 yards off our nose. You could hear the booms, obviously. The air raid sirens are going. Over the speakers, it's telling everybody to go to their shelters. And we're just on a plane filled with gas. And weirdly, I was calm because everybody else was calm. And we never bothered putting on our vests or our helmets because what's that going to do? And everybody, we just sort of hung out. And I was weirdly relaxed. And for anybody who's ever been in a war zone, they'll know this. You have all the feelings you're supposed to have. You don't necessarily have them at the right times. My panic came later. We finally were given the all clear. We went to our quarters. The next day I had the most amazing, after about 3 hours of sleep, that's all we got, had the most amazing experience. I got to experience an airdrop mission where we flew a C-17 at 2,000 feet. I watched the back of the door open and whoosh, flew out the back, fuel, ammunition, and water supply to forward operating base, about an hour and a half, 2 hours from Bagram, and then we flew back. Most amazing experience, right? Now, the goal was to leave the country. I was just there to experience an airdrop, meet some people. I had no particular responsibility other than to witness. We found another plane that was going back to Bagram. We asked the pilot, can we join your flight? He said yes. We waited for many hours because there's a lot of waiting. And we finally got on the plane. We're literally 5 minutes from leaving. We're all strapped into the back of this KC-46 again, and it's a outbound aeromedical. So we're taking out wounded servicemen and women. And 5 minutes before we leave, the pilot comes up to us and says, I need to bump you off this flight because I need some extra room for stretchers. And we went, sounds good. If there's ever a good reason to get bumped off a flight, this is it. So we took our stuff off and we thought, okay, let's go find another flight. And that's when we learned that there are no other flights leaving until Tuesday, and it's only Saturday. And now all of a sudden, every fiber of my body sank. All of a sudden I realized I'm stuck in this country and there's no guarantee I'm going to get on a flight on Tuesday. I don't have any way to contact my parents. I'm just going to be completely out of touch after the date that they think I'm coming home. And even if I did call them, what am I going to say? I'm not going to be home. I'm in Afghanistan, like in the middle of a war, I remember I had a tremendous self-awareness of how I felt and who I was becoming. And there was a public affairs officer who said, I can get you to Kyrgyzstan, but you don't have the right visa. And I literally put my finger in his face. I don't do that. I've never held my finger in someone's face in my life. And I put my finger in his face and said, you get me on that plane. Like, I don't talk to people that way. And I could see myself becoming this person that I am not and didn't want to be. We went back to our quarters. We're all exhausted. And so I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes just because I was tired, but there's no way I was sleeping. My mind was racing. One of the officers said, well, I'm going to see if I can find us another flight. And so he left. And the other officer said, well, I'm going to go to the gym then. And he left. And he thought I was sleeping. So as he left, he turned the lights out and I was left by myself in the dark. My mind going crazy. And now I'm panicked. That feeling that I should have had when the rockets hit, I'm now having it right now. I'm convinced I'm going to die. I'm convinced there's going to be another rocket attack. I'm convinced it's going to land on me. I'm convinced my parents are going to find out I was here when the military knocks on the door and tells them. And no logic can dissuade me. I know one of the reasons I feel this way is because I have no sense of purpose, right? I didn't come here for any reason. I just came here to witness. And so look, I'm in the purpose business. I'm like, all right, Simon, you need purpose. You need purpose. Come up with a sense of purpose. All right, you're here to learn and come back and tell their story. Okay, there you go. And it made me feel good for like 5 minutes. And then it disappeared and the panic and the paranoia came back in. And I went through this cycle multiple times trying to invent a purpose for myself. And then I finally realized I couldn't come up with anything and I gave up. And I lie in that bed resigned to the fact that I was stuck there without a sense of purpose. And I decided that if I was going to get stuck here, I might as well make myself useful, that I would volunteer, that I would speak to the troops that they wanted me to. I would carry boxes. I would sweep floors. I didn't care how menial the work. I just wanted to serve those who were serving others. And in that moment, I found unbelievable calm, even excitement to be there to serve those who serve others. As if it were a movie, the timing was extraordinary. Having just come to this remarkable insight, the door flies open. It's Major Throckmorton. He says, there's a flight that's been redirected. It's going to Ramstein. We can get on the plane if we leave now. They're not going to wait for us. We have to go. We have to go now. We have to go now. Where's Matt? I'm like, he's at the gym. We run to the gym. We get Matt off the treadmill. There's no time for him to shower. He puts his uniform back on. We grab all of our stuff and we run to the flight line to get on this plane. We get to the flight line. We can see the C-17 we're supposed to get on. It's right over there. We can see it. But the security stops us and won't let us onto the flight line. There's a fallen soldier ceremony happening somewhere on the base. And out of respect, everything stops. And so we sat on the curb and waited. And while we were sitting there, I told the guys what I had gone through lying in that bed. Mind you, I have no idea how long I was in that bed for. I could have been in there for 10 minutes. I could have been there for an hour. I don't want anybody to tell me either. I lost all concept of time. I sat there and told them what I had gone through, and I'd come to this remarkable insight that true purpose in life is to serve those who serve others. And I wept while I was sitting on that curb. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know about the military is crying is just fine. Finally, the security came up and we were able to walk to the aircraft. We boarded the plane. We would be the only 3 passengers aboard this aircraft. What I didn't know at the time is the reason this flight had been redirected is that we would be carrying the soldier for whom they just had the fallen soldier ceremony. We stood there and waited, and the Army brought on the flag-draped casket. The soldiers put the casket right in the middle of the aircraft. They stood there and did a very slow 8-count salute. They turned, marched off the plane, and we could watch them hugging and crying as they walked out of sight. Our Air Force crew got to work and they strapped the casket down in the middle of the aircraft, and we got going. I've never had such an honor in my life, having just gone through this experience that I had on the ground, learning that true purpose is the opportunity to serve those who serve others, that I get to bring home somebody who knows a lot more about purpose than I ever will. We land at Ramstein, and we have one night at Ramstein before we come home. The final flight home is another C-17 back to Andrews Air Force Base. And this is an aeromedical evacuation. So it's what they call an AE mission. So the wounded. Some ambulatory, some not. And we get into the flight. This flight was a little more relaxed, and lots of nurses tending to the wounded. And in the back of the aircraft was a single gurney, a single Marine who was in what they call CCAT, which is an artificial coma. Very, very badly wounded, and he had 4 doctors attending to him personally. And I sort of avoided going to the back of the plane because it was uncomfortable. And I finally said, no, I gotta go. So I walked to the back of the plane to talk to the docs, and they walked me through his wounds. His buddy stepped on an IED and was killed, and he took the shrapnel. He had shrapnel in the chest, shrapnel in the eye, and he was in very bad shape. And the docs were telling me that the amount of new techniques that they were learning how to treat trauma, just because of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, was slowly making its way into civilian hospitals. So even when they're wounded, they're still serving us, And the lead doc was a reservist who works in an ER in Austin. And had I not gone through what I had just gone through 24 hours before, I would never have asked him this question. But I did. I asked him, hey doc, you're a good guy. You work in an ER. You save lives for a living. That's your job. Do you have a different kind of feeling on these missions than you do back home? And he looked at me and he said, 90 to 95% of the people who come through an ER are either drunks or idiots. He says, there's not a single drunk or idiot on this aircraft. He said, the feeling that I get when I get to work these missions during my reserve hours is more powerful than any feeling I ever get when I'm working back home. Again, the greatest sense of purpose and meaning we can have in our lives is to serve those who serve others. Part of the deal that they made with me when I went the general said, I want you to go and I want you to come back and tell us your insights. What you saw that we did well, what you saw just tell us your insights. So about 2 weeks after I got home, I went back to Scott Air Force Base and was standing in a room full of all the brass, all the generals, the colonels, all the command from the mobility forces. And they just wanted me to report on what I saw. And I went through everything. And I wasn't sure if I was going to tell them about bringing home this flag draped casket. That was the emotions were very raw still. And I'm not sure I wanted to do it or could do it. And I remembered I was reporting on everything else that I saw and the people I met and the things that I thought were amazing. And I took a pause and I decided to tell the story. And now, the emotions are right on the surface. And I tell the whole story in even more detail than I'm telling you now. And I got to the point where I choked up and I couldn't continue. I couldn't tell the story anymore. Now, if this was the private sector and I was standing on a stage telling this exact story, somebody in private sector would say to me, take your time. They'd say, it's okay. That's what they would say to me, right? It's happened. Take your time, right? That's not what happened. I stood there completely choked up. I couldn't speak. And was one voice from the back of the room, the general. And he said, go on. Meaning, go on and we're with you. Right? And that's the difference between private sector and these wonderful people. In private sector, they say to you, take your time as if you're alone. Take all the time you need by yourself. And here, these people who understand what service truly means, they say, go forwards, go on, move forwards, you have no choice, and we will be with you. And that's what I learned from them. When my friends are struggling, I don't say, take your time. When my friends are struggling, I say, go on. When my friends are crying, I say, go on. The underlying message is, and I am here sitting in the mud with you. It is the greatest honor of my life. And because of that experience, that's where the book Leaders Eat Last came from. That experience was the impetus for that book. So when we talk about what the future looks like, I just want to live a life of service. I want to continue to serve those who serve others. And to meet people who live a life of service, I will do anything for them. I think there's an unwritten rule that when you meet someone who's devoted their life to serving those who serve others, that it is our responsibility to serve them. There's an unwritten rule. The reason I do so much pro bono stuff is because when I meet people who are on the side of good, on the side of service, I obey that unwritten agreement that I will be there for you and I will serve you and expect nothing in return. And if you want to bring it full circle back to relationships, when one person shows up in the relationship to serve you, you have the moral responsibility to serve them. Because to serve someone who serves others, they are serving you, which means we have to serve them. I live my life by that code.